Hi, it's Ann from the Olive Scene, and welcome to our March Facebook Live Cooking with Ann. And March is, of course, St. Patrick's Day month, so I wanted to do something kind of Irish themed with our flavor of the month, which is our espresso balsamic vinegar. This vinegar has a base of our 18-year traditional balsamic vinegar, so it has all that thick, rich, beautiful balsamic vinegar, and then it's infused with both espresso and dark roast coffee. So it's got a wonderful flavor. It's probably one of our more least known ones. People are maybe a little bit hesitant to try it, but I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more about it. But I want to get the part of the recipe going that needs to heat up because it also has to cool, so it'll give me a chance to talk about the espresso balsamic vinegar. So I'm going to get this pan started. We are making today an Irish chocolate whiskey cake. So this is great to serve at your St. Patrick's Day dinner if you're having a party or just want to have something special for St. Patrick's Day. We have a lot of recipes on our website for St. Patrick's Day using our oils and vinegars. So go and find them. And then this is a great recipe to have for dessert. And baking with olive oil is something that is wonderful to do. I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. I hope you have the recipe. It is posted so you can follow along. Becky is here filming so she can relay any questions that you have to me. She can also probably answer all of them as well. So I'm going to get started as I want to heat this up. We start with extra virgin olive oil. This is a mild, and I'm going to get into that in a moment, and that's 3/4 of a cup. And the reason why we're heating this up is because of the whiskey. We want to cook off some of the alcohol, and it's also going to cook off as we bake it. We have 1/4 cup of the espresso balsamic vinegar and 1.25 cups of coffee, and I made the coffee a little bit strong. So the next part of it is adding the sugar and the cocoa, and I wanted to show you this. I did tweak this recipe after I made it the first time because one of the things I naturally do, which I saw was not in the recipe, is something calls for me to add cocoa, especially to a liquid. I don't want the cocoa to clump up, which it will naturally do in liquids. So I always add it, if I'm adding both sugar and cocoa at the same time, I add it to sugar and I whisk it and allow the sugar to break up the clumps. And it'll incorporate much quicker and easier into the liquid that you're putting it into. And we're going to want this to dissolve, so this needs to get a little bit warm to do that in this liquid. And then we need it to cool because we don't want to add the eggs to something too hot or you're going to have scrambled eggs in your cake, which would not be very appetizing. And I have done it when I'm really in a rush. If this doesn't cool quick enough for us to show, I may put it over ice just to get it cooled down. So it's going in, and I'm whisking as I'm putting it in slowly. So again, the cocoa doesn't clump up. But mixed with the sugar, it usually will not, which is a nice way to do that. Already that coffee with the whiskey, there's something about coffee and whiskey together that is lovely. The last thing that's going to go in, and I'm going to whisk it as it goes, is the brown sugar. And that's 1 cup of that. And any lumps there will just dissolve as this heats up. So I'm just going to stir this. I'm going to let it warm up. Hi, Lynn. Hi, Lynn. Thanks for joining us. Okay, that's getting warm, and I can already hear that the sugar crystals are not on the bottom anymore, so it already is melting. So I'm going to turn that off and let that cool. I may have to take it off of here. While that's cooling, I wanted to show you that my pan is ready. This is a 10-inch springform pan. I did only have one, so the one I made earlier isn't a 9-inch, so the cake is a little higher than it should be. But a 10-inch is a good size for this. I did use butter on the bottom, and then I dusted it with that extra cocoa that's called for on the recipe. I didn't need 2 tablespoons. That was a little too much. I would say 1 was plenty. The reason I didn't use oil on the bottom of this, when you go to put flour or cocoa, because the oil is wetter, it clumps and sticks, and it's very hard to shake it and get it distributed. So I did use butter. You can spray it with Pam if you want. That works pretty well too. But I didn't use olive oil there. So my pan is ready to go. I'm going to actually take this off of here so it has a chance to cool. Okay, next item is the dry ingredients. 2 cups of flour. When you get flour for baking, I should have shown you this, which I didn't. I do not scoop the flour this way into my container of flour, but I actually scoop the flour into the measuring cup so that it is loose. You can easily pack flour and then have too much flour in your baking. There's a lot of times they're intimidated by baking because it's more exact than cooking. If you put a little bit too much of something or another in cooking, it tends to be a little forgiving. You want to follow a recipe. A recipe is kind of like a chemistry experiment. So you do want to follow it along, and there's some certain techniques that you do want to follow because it makes things turn out, and that's one of them. So that is a scoop, and then flatten it off on the top, and you'll have the right amount of flour, which is 2 cups. The next step that I do when I'm adding baking soda or baking powder, I use a small sieve. That's just the flour. And in this, it is a teaspoon and a half. So again, I scoop and scrape, and then I'm going to put it in the sieve. And you can see that I do have just a little bit of clumped pieces of baking soda in there. And that will take that, using the sieve will take it out. If you have ever bitten into a cake and gotten a clump of baking soda, it's quite off-putting. So I always sift. Baking powder, baking soda, I always sift into the flour. Now, the spices. It is a half a teaspoon of sea salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, and make sure you put it in there. That little bit of pepper just enhances the chocolate as well. It's really, really nice, as well as the 1/8 of a teaspoon of cloves. And that's going in. You actually could have put that right in the sieve with your baking soda all together. And that's all together. So my dry ingredients are ready to go. Next are the wet ingredients. Other than the liquid over there. I do have 1 cup of mini chocolate chips. I did measure them and put them back in the bag. And 3 eggs, which are room temperature. And these I'm going to not put straight into the cocoa mixture because, again, I want to give it a chance to incorporate quickly without cooking the eggs because it's going to be a little bit warm. And we don't want a cooked egg or a scrambled egg in there. So I'm going to whisk this up. The vanilla, 1 teaspoon, is going to go in with it. And this is ready to go. So I've got the flour, I've got the eggs, I've got the cocoa with the oil and the vinegar has warmed. Let's see how we're doing. Still a little bit warm. So I'm going to let this cool another minute and just talk to you a minute about the oils and vinegars. So just take another minute here. Okay, so espresso, excuse me, espresso balsamic vinegar. One of the things we love about it, espresso, is the coffee that is in here is a wonderful enhancement to meats. So if you want to make a marinade, adding espresso to it, especially for beef or for lamb or for pork, really brings out the flavor of the meat. It's a great thing to do. Lots of recipes on our website for different marinades to do. Also makes a great glaze. So if you're doing a roast in the oven and the roast is done, all those bits that are in the bottom of the pan, put a little glug of espresso balsamic vinegar in there, just about a tablespoon. Pick up those bits and put a nice thin glaze over the top of your roast. It's amazing. It's amazing. Same thing out on the grill. Just brush it on your steaks as you're grilling straight up. It'll caramelize the steaks. It brings out this great flavor. Wonderful thing to use for that. The oil that I used was our California Cuvée. California olive oils. I was just in California visiting my son, and all the olive trees were everywhere, and they were bare. Why? Because they're in our store in this bottle of olive oil. The harvest season ended in February. About mid-February, they're done picking. It has just arrived in our stores, and it is beautiful. It is freshest oil in the world right now. It's a nice mild oil, which is great to bake with. You get this wonderful fruitiness added to the baking, and olive oil gives cakes a wonderful texture. You're going to love it. The other oil I wanted to talk about is our Arbequina. This is a Southern Hemisphere oil. So this oil is about 8 months old. It is in its prime. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our of the amount that we have in our stores. This is a great oil to bake with. It's beautifully fruity. It's got great creaminess. So either one of these oils are wonderful, and you get to taste right now in our stores. We have a couple Southern Hemisphere oils left and a couple of Northern Hemisphere oils coming in. You can taste both hemispheres, which is great. You can only do that twice a year. So this is a good time to get in the store and taste and try these great oils. And get a couple Southern Hemisphere oils because you can't get them again for another 6 months. They're wonderful. So our espresso balsamic vinegar, great for marinades, great, of course, for a vinaigrette. And with the vinaigrette, it is wonderful in those wonderful big salads. You know, it has arugula, spinach, big greens, some goat cheese. It's wonderful on cheese. And also, if you want to reduce this vinegar, any of our vinegars, if you want to reduce them, put a little bit in a pot. Bring it just barely to a simmer and let it do that for about 20 minutes. It'll thicken. Some of the acidity will cook off. It'll get thicker, richer, a little sweeter. You can put it right on ice cream. This one, which I was so surprised about, I was at a friend's house, and they had reduced the espresso balsamic vinegar. You want to make sure you don't go too far with the reduction because you could actually turn it into like a hard candy, which you don't want to do. So about 20 minutes is all it takes. And she just poured it on some sparkling water, and we had it as this sparkling, rich coffee drink. It was great. It was delicious. Drinking vinegars are a rage right now with the shrubs and all kinds of drinking vinegars for cocktails. This is a great one to use. People, like I said, they come in the stores like espresso balsamic vinegar. Once you start trying it, and my mother's favorite, which everyone should know, chipotle oil with espresso balsamic vinegar, amazing vinaigrette, amazing marinade. Make sure you try it. Okay, back to our cake. We've got our oils here. We have everything in and ready to go. It is just our oil here, which is good. If you can touch this pot, it's warm enough. And it's very comfortable to touch. It's cool enough, I'm sorry. It's not as hot. It's cool enough so that you can use it. If it was still too warm, and let's say you needed to get this in the oven, you could go the opposite way. If you add, while you are whisking, I don't have a big enough bowl to do it, but while you're whisking this, if you add warm liquid to it, you can warm up these eggs enough that they won't cook, and then you can add them back. But mine is actually cool enough. You don't need to boil this oil and vinegar mixture. You just want it warm enough so that the sugars dissolve. Okay, and it's going while I'm whisking. There we go. It's in. Show it to you. It's a nice smooth. It almost reminds me of like a precursor to a ganache. So it's a little bit thicker. Smells really good. And now I have the dry ingredients, which I'm going to just mix together a little bit so that we don't have clumps of any of the spices.
Hi, Sue from LaGrange. Thanks for joining us.
Any questions, bring them through. I hope I'm answering everything as I go along. Okay, to make a good cake, the type of flour, make sure you're not using bread flour. You can use cake flour. And the reason for that is or an all-purpose flour. You don't want something with a lot of gluten. In the same way, this is why we mix everything very separate. And we're going to bring them together and just fold it over. We don't want to beat it. When you beat flour, that's why you knead it, you beat it to make bread, because you want to develop that gluten and have it come through. We don't want that in a cake. We want this to stay nice and tender. So I made a little well. It's going to spill out over the well. All of my liquid ingredients are going into the flour. I'm not going to use my whisk. I'm not going to use a big spoon. I'm going to use a spatula and get this all turned over. This is called folding in the flour. And by folding it and not beating it, I'm not letting the gluten in the flour start to develop. And a spatula is nice because it will move the flour into the liquid, or the liquid into the flour, very quickly and easily. And there we go. My flour is incorporated. A couple more here. So you don't have any dry spots all the way down from the bottom and up. And it's a nice blend. And you're good to go. I've got my pan, my 10-inch pan, so it won't be quite as high as you'll see. The 9-inch is quite a high cake. It's not meant to be too high. It's a nice cake because you don't have to pull out your mixer, which is nice. If you want to add another flavor component to this, you can use a different oil. So, as I always say with every recipe, change the flavor of the oil or change the flavor of the vinegar, and you'll have a whole new recipe. You can use blood orange, which everybody loves putting orange in with chocolate. Also goes very nicely here. Our Eureka lemon is nice in this recipe for the oil. You can also, if you wanted to move away from the espresso vinegar, our black currant vinegar is nice. Our raspberry vinegar is nice. Okay, it's in. It's going in the oven. And my oven was preheating at 350 degrees. And that's going to be in there about 55 minutes. And then make sure that the center is coming out clean, but don't let it dry. With a dark chocolate cake, and guess what I didn't put in? Well, this cake is not having the extra chocolate chips, so I don't want to pull it back out of there. I'm actually going to just pull that out. I'm going to pull it out and sprinkle them, because it'll work. Sorry about that. That's already hot. I'm just going to sprinkle them right on the top, and now it's good. They'll make their way down and into the cake. But you should have mixed them in. Would have been a little nicer.
Still be good.
Yeah, it'll still be good. Should have double checked my recipe before I finished. Always a good move. Okay. There we go. Now we're ready. Okay, so we're going to pretend that that's been 55 minutes, and voila, our cake is done. It is a dark, rich chocolate cake. This does not need any frosting. You're going to cool it for about 15 minutes, and then I just loosen the edge of this, and then I let it continue cooling. I don't pull it off. I don't do that. Once it's all the way cool, this can come off, the ring can come off. You can flip this onto a plate, which I already had done. Lift off the bottom, lifts off really nicely. Grab your plate, and there you have it. To finish this,
Sue says it looks beautiful.
thanks.
Do you have to use a springform pan? She's asking.
You don't have to. I have done it in just a 10-inch cake pan. If you do that, I would put a piece of parchment on the bottom, so when you flip it, you can peel that parchment off. It makes it much easier to get the cake out. This is all you need, a little bit of powdered sugar. Make sure the cake is cool or the powdered sugar will melt right onto the cake. And there you have it, ready for St. Patrick's Day. Little dessert. Espresso balsamic vinegar was what was in there. And if you want to make this really a festivity, because of course Irish shortbread goes with it, we do have a recipe for oatmeal shortbread, which uses an olive oil, but we have a wonderful new product in our store just for this through this spring. It is a little shortbread petite, and this is a lemon. It's called Lemon Drop with the chocolate. It's beautiful, great presentation. It's great to have out for your dessert table. I hope you enjoyed. Give this recipe a try. Any questions, bring them through either on Facebook or message us through the website. An email will do it. And enjoy. It's wonderful. Pick up some espresso balsamic vinegar. Use it for a lot of different things, not just for the cake. Look on our website, plenty of recipes. Hope to see you soon, next month especially, on our Cooking Live. Thank you.